Chapter 3. Demand, Supply, and Market Equilibrium. In societies with many people, production must satisfy wide-ranging tastes and preferences, and producers must therefore specialize. Firms and households, the basic decision-making units. A firm exists when a person or a group of people decides to produce a product or products by transforming resources, or inputs, into outputs, the products that are sold in the market. Firms are the primary producing units in a market economy. We assume that firms make decisions to try to maximize profits. Households are the primary consuming units in an economy. All households' incomes are subject to constraints. Input markets and output markets, the circular flow. Households and firms interact in two basic kinds of markets, product or output markets and input or factor markets. Goods and services intended for use by households are exchanged in output markets. In output markets, competing firms supply and competing households demand. In input markets, competing firms demand and competing households supply. Ultimately, firms choose the quantities and character of outputs produced, the types and quantities of inputs demanded, and the technologies used in production. Households choose the types and quantities of products demanded and the types and quantities of inputs supplied. Demand in product/output markets. The quantity demanded of an individual product by an individual household depends on 1. Price. 2. Income. 3. Wealth. 4. Prices of other products. 5. Tastes and preferences. And 6. Expectations about the future. Quantity demanded is the amount of a product that an individual household would buy in a given period if it could buy all that it wanted at the current price. A demand schedule shows the quantities of a product that a household would buy at different prices. The same information can be presented graphically in a demand curve. The law of demand states that there is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded, ceteris paribus. As price rises, quantity demanded decreases and vice versa. Demand curve slope downward. All demand curves eventually intersect the price axis because there is always a price above which a household cannot or will not pay. Also, all demand curves eventually intersect the quantity axis because demand for most goods is limited, if only by time, even at a zero price. When an increase in income causes demand for a good to rise, that good is a normal good. When an increase in income causes demand for a good to fall, that good is an inferior good. If a rise in the price of good X causes demand for good Y to increase, the goods are substitutes. If a rise in the price of X causes demand for Y to fall, the goods are complements. Market demand is simply the sum of all the quantities of a good or service demanded per period by all the households buying in the market for that good or service. It is the sum of all the individual quantities demanded at each price. Supply in product/output markets. Quantity supplied by a firm depends on 1. The price of the good or service. 2. The cost of producing the product, which includes the prices of required inputs and the technologies that can be used to produce the product, and 3. The prices of related products. Market supply is the sum of all that is supplied in each period by all producers of a single product. It is the sum of all the individual quantities supplied at each price. It is important to distinguish between movements along demand and supply curves and shifts of demand and supply curves. The demand curve shows the relationship between price and quantity demanded. The supply curve shows the relationship between price and quantity supplied. A change in price is a movement along the curve. Changes in tastes, income, wealth, expectations, or prices of other goods and services cause demand curves to shift. Changes in costs, input prices, technology, or prices of related goods and services cause supply curves to shift. Market equilibrium. When quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied at the current price, excess demand, or a shortage, exists and the price tends to rise. When prices in a market rise, quantity demanded falls and quantity supplied rises until an equilibrium is reached at which quantity supplied and quantity demanded are equal. At equilibrium, there is no further tendency for price to change. When quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded at the current price, excess supply, or a surplus, exists and the price tends to fall. When price falls, quantity supply decreases and quantity demanded increases until an equilibrium price is